Yeah, okay. Okay, good evening. The planning board meeting for Tuesday, July 25th will come to order. If you look at the items on the agenda, we are going to continue the public hearing for 1975 Salem Street, so we're not actually going to hear that tonight. Everything else we will discuss in some shape or form. So why don't we start at the top with the bond releases, Rebecca?
That's great. So the first bond release is 1600 Osgood Street. That's the Osgood Solar Project. On July 5th, 2016, the planning board voted to allow the installation of a 3.6 megawatt ground-mounted solar array, inverter transformer stations on concrete pads, utility disconnects and underground wiring and conduit, and the creation of 8 new parking spaces in the Industrial 2 zoning district. As per the conditions of the decision, the applicant was asked to submit a letter by the engineer stating that the project substantially complies with approved plans by the planning board. Also, an engineer certifying that the lighting meets IES standards, which is Illuminating Engineering Society standards, and an as-built of the plan. Staff conducted a site visit of the actual site. There was an issue with one of the catch basins. The catch basins didn't seem to be functioning properly. It was called out. Within a week, the applicant had addressed the concerns. I went back out, I viewed it, and it was functioning properly after that point in time. So they have complied with the decisions and the conditions that the planning board put forth.
So it's your recommendation to release all the bond?
Based upon the fact that they've met the conditions, yes.
Okay. Any questions from anybody? Pete?
Oh, I have one question.
Yeah.
The as-built plans that were part of the online packet, they resemble what was built on site in your eyes?
Yes, correct. When I walked the site with one of the applicant's representative, Dan Leary, and they definitely had the array set up with the fences and the curbing and the signage and all of that.
Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion to release the remaining bond for 1600 Osgood Street, Osgood Solar?
I'll make a motion to release the bond for 1600 Osgood Street, Osgood Solar.
Okay, motion made. And do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. No further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And the other bond release?
This one is for 1661 Great Pond Road. It was permitted as 1665 adjacent to at that point in time because there was no lot. I can pull up the locus on the screen so that you can see exactly which one we're talking about. So recently at our last public hearing, we were discussing 1665 where the cursor is. This is actually for 1661. So on July 2nd, 2013, the board voted to allow the construction of a single-family dwelling unit and driveway, the demolition of an existing shed, installation of utility, stormwater management facilities, and associated grading on a parcel 100 feet of a wetland and within 200 feet of Lake Cochituate in the non-disturbance and non-discharge zone of the Watershed Protection District. Per the conditions of the decision, the applicant has submitted an as-built plan by a registered engineer stating that the plans comply with the plans endorsed by the planning board. The applicant has complied with the conditions that were set forth with a few insubstantial changes made by the planning staff throughout that process, and there are photos of the completed project which were included in your packet.
Any questions? Pete, I don't know if you have any questions or
I think the
concerns.
applicant put in some extra swale here, and I think that's correct, and
That's correct, yeah. We made it a little bit more substantial than was on the plan. If you look at the comments from the engineer, that installation is slightly, a couple of feet further west than called for on the plan. And the reason for that, very simply, was because when I bought the property, there was already erosion control in place that had been there. It was not really sufficient for new construction, but it seemed like it shouldn't be removed. There would have been more disturbance to remove it, so we added another row of erosion control, which ended up pushing us just a couple of feet to the left or to the west.
so I actually didn't have a question. I just wanted to thank you for putting in that additional amount, and
Okay.
that's great.
Okay.
Any other questions? none, would somebody like to make a motion to release the remaining bond for 1661 Great Pond
Actually,
Road?
I didn't have a question, but I just wanted, something I noticed. In the letter from the certification letter states that the, that it's the opinion of the architect that the project was completed in reasonable compliance with the approved plan. And the other one I saw, and I think what our decisions that I've seen say is substantial compliance. I do think there is a difference between reasonable compliance and substantial compliance. So I do have some concerns. I did speak with our representative from planning, and she explained to me that what was done was actually more than what was required, and some of it was part of an unsubstantial change to the plan. So two things. I do think it should have, I think you've done what you needed to do. So I think you should get your money back, okay? But I think if we're going to have, if it's going to say that we're requiring substantial compliance, then the letter should say substantial compliance. And if an engineer is not going to stamp that, that means that there isn't been substantial compliance with the plan. The other possibility is change the language in our decisions to say substantial compliance with the approved plan and any subsequent modifications or insubstantial changes. That way the engineer feels comfortable, okay, it's not as built, but it's with the changes that were allowed stamp. I'm comfortable with that. So I don't think you did anything wrong. I'm still going to vote to approve the bond because I don't think it was necessarily to release, but I just think that's something that we should
I mean,
take note of.
did your guy like use the word, the language you did just by sort of accident? Or?
I think what happens, you know, honestly, these things, and I've worked in multiple towns. Some towns ask for certifications that say in substantial compliance, others in reasonable compliance. I think it's just a question of a carryover. I think to most of us out in the field, you know, I understand your distinction. I think maybe it's a refinement that can be done, you know, down the road and paying a little bit closer attention. But I think different communities require or ask for different semantics. So.
Yeah. Okay. I think it should be substantial. I don't know if the guy can reissue his letter, but.
I'll have that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, with that in mind, would you like to make the motion?
So
get it, yeah.
with that caveat being stated, I think that you've substantially done what you were asked to do. So I would make a motion to release all the remaining on the bond for 1661 Great Pond Road.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Okay.
Thank you all very much. Thanks.
So we're on to our Form A.
Yes. So this is for 1099 Salem Street. So I'll just put a locus up on the board for you. So the board originally granted the applicant a frontage exception special permit, and R2 required 150 feet of frontage. Lot 1 had approximately 82 feet, and Lot 2 approximately 52 feet. The special permit granted the applicant the exceptions from the 150, and the plan complies with all other regulations concerning public safety access, public way, and CBA. Just to note, as part of the original permit, there were conditions that we had applied. Most specifically was the DPW would stake the field and make sure, or the applicant would stake the field and DPW would confirm via the AutoCAD that they had not disturbed over an acre. DPW has confirmed that the AutoCAD shows that they will not disturb over an acre. However, they will watch the project and will periodically check in to make sure that remains the case. Additionally, one of the conditions was that the health department has accepted the septic design. The health department has just accepted the septic design for 1099 and what will become the new lot, which will be 1087. I visited the lot today with Jennifer Hughes, the conservation administrator, to confirm erosion control, and with a few minor adjustments, the erosion control is in place. So they have met the conditions of the permit that we put forth for the frontage exception.
Special permit. But this is for the Form A, so.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head were they two separate parcels? Or was it one parcel that's being divided into two pieces? I
It's
think
one
the
parcel
latter,
being put
yeah.
into two pieces. I'll pull up the
Yeah.
actual A&R plan itself. But there is that break in between because of the easement for National Grid.
Yeah, that's, actually, they're not separate lots, it's just an easement, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's the power, New England Power easement right there, and the lot line comes down here and splits over here, and here's the two different lot frontages that were granted in order to make the lot compliant.
So what are they calling each lot? I can't see, can you scroll down a little bit? No, the other way.
So there's lot 1 and lot 2.
Oh, okay, lot 1 and lot 2. Okay, I see. Okay. So we got the proposed lot lines, so. I'm trying to remember, were you both on the board when we heard this before? Okay, so yeah, you're familiar with the details of this, so. Any questions?
I had a question just regarding the application form. In Part A, it says each lot on the plan meets one or following the criteria, and it's marked that the frontage is on a public way. It says has frontage, lot area, and lot width required under zoning bylaw, a public way. Does that need to be modified to reference the previous lot, the frontage exception in this application, or is that the proper way to fill out that form?
It doesn't change the fact that it's a public way.
Yeah.
The frontage is just modified
Well,
based upon the
it's
special
about more
permit.
about the zoning bylaw.
Well,
portion
it's
of that state.
because they have the permit, it's conforming
Okay.
at this point, so. it's
So
like
that's
yeah.
how
If they
they-
hadn't gotten it, then
Okay.
you could carve it a lot, but you were right on, it was unbuildable at this point, so, yeah, because you can't have access over the frontage, so.
I just didn't know if
Yeah.
the special permit had to
I
be
think
referenced in that
okay.
application at all, but I'll leave that to you.
Is everybody okay with this? Somebody would like to make a motion to direct the planner to assign the Form A or the A&R for 1099 Salem Street?
I'll make a motion to direct the town planner to sign the A&R for 1099 Salem Street.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, okay, 1975, we're not going to hear. On the next one, Rebecca, there is a little bit of an issue, so can you explain?
Yes, the project was improperly noticed, and not everyone received proper notification, and therefore we are not going to open the public hearing, and we are going to renotice and notice all of the abutters in a 300-foot radius of the project, and open the hearing on the August 15th, 2017 Planning Board meeting.
Okay. So we don't have to do anything more with it
Nothing.
at this point, okay. Any questions, or, okay. So the next item on the, is we're down to discussion items, and we're going to talk about 1600 Osgood Street, the town meeting petition on medicinal marijuana, and we're also going to have to address the existing temporary moratorium and how it lasts. So just before we get started, I think we've talked about it some at this board, is that we knew there was the decision at the annual town meeting where it did not pass, but we knew that the issue had not obviously going away, that we still had to address it in a comprehensive manner. And as a consequence to that, we've invited the prior applicant in to work with us in a collaborative manner to see if there's a potential for, I think we're really looking at two things here. One is to understand in much more depth what it is that the applicant is intending to do, which we didn't really have the opportunity to do last time, and then also to decide on the process by which we craft a bylaw, potentially, or work with a bylaw, do the due diligence on a bylaw that will potentially pass muster in front of the town. So this is the first step, I think, in a lengthy process, and it's a dialogue with the applicant and a chance to move forward. Before we start, I don't know if anybody else from the board wants to speak. I know we've talked about it, and you might just sort of, if anybody does have a perspective of what they would like to see as part of this process. Okay, well, with that is a starting point. I think this is an open-ended discussion. We're not sure exactly where it's going to lead us, but Mr. Leary, if you want to kick things off, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you. I'm not Mr. Leary.
Yeah, you're not Mr. Leary. You're much better looking, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that's Mr. Leary.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us back. Thank you.
For those of us who weren't on the board last time, could you let us know who you are?
I'm about to tell you
All right.
more than probably you want to know. My name is Hooks Johnston. I live at 35 Constituent Drive. We almost didn't move there because I couldn't spell the street, but I've since learned it. I've lived there for 6 years and in Andover for 30 years. I'm a member of the Board of Advisors of the Osgood Project. And the reason I am are two. Number one, I'm the retired Senior Vice President of Smith & Nephew, which is a fairly large medical device company in Andover, which you know. I helped found 2 R&D centers, one there and one at UMass Lowell, called Massachusetts Medical Device Development Center. So I've done that too. Maybe the most important element of why I'm sitting here is that I was fortunate to be the chairman of the planning board in Andover for 10 years. And also in Glastonbury, Connecticut for 10 more before that. So I have a pretty good idea, John, of the shoes you're in and what you're dealing with and as a board. So that's why they've asked me to help on this process. I guess the first point I want to make is that I have listened very carefully to what you all have been saying for the past several months. I listened to your discussion before the town meeting. I listened to your discussion during the town meeting. And very helpfully, I listened to your discussion that you recently had after the town meeting and your concerns and your questions. They went to use, they went to physical size, they went to recreation, they went to the team. I mean, it just went on and on. There were a lot of questions that frankly were not answered thoroughly. They were touched on in some cases, and others they were just skipped, which is unfortunate, but they were. So the basic theme that came out, and you just said it again, John, and thank you for saying it, is that I don't think the board had the information to deal with something. The example that I gave Dan was, you all sort of approved a little mouse, small zone over in the corner of the town, and we show up with an elephant. And you say, goodness, wait a minute, this wasn't what we were thinking or comprehending. One of your board members said that very, very pointedly in one of the reviews. But this thing was dramatically different than what you all had considered or had approved. Our business is to create a cultivation and R&D center for cannabis without retail. Without retail. And we have recognized that we have to refocus our efforts to put a development team together that can comprehensively ask every question. We listened to your conversation and what you'd read in Colorado, where this happened and that happened. We never gave you evidence of what we were going to do and how the management team that that Dr. Goldstein has put together, which includes me, with some experience, I hope you realize, to really go forward with this. So what we are going to propose is that we come to you in the subsequent meetings and bring you a comprehensive plan of this entire endeavor. I mean, I've read your regulations. They aren't different than Andover's in terms of your design review and your special exception. It's the same things that we dealt with, and you're dealing with them too. Tell me the use. Tell me what's going to go on inside. What's going to go on the outside. How is it going to affect our town? with all its utilities and energy and water and traffic, et cetera. And what is the benefit to the town? So that's our plan. Our plan is to basically, if you remember, John, in my comments to you at the town meeting, I said, you know, you had the zoning and you had all these powers in the review and the special exception to manage it. And what I heard later was, we want to do those first. Maybe not to the nth degree, but certainly the major issues. We want to go through the whole thing and understand what is it that you're bringing to potentially put in our town. And only then, frankly, can you identify or say this is a worthwhile endeavor or not. Okay? So that's our goal. In fact, I went through all your regulations, and they're the same. Parking, vehicular, pedestrian traffic, design appearance, the building and landscaping, adequacy of water supply and drainage, security measures, the Department of Health requirements, ventilation, et cetera. We're going to give you a plan that gives the layout of the building, all the uses of the building in terms of offices and labs and manufacturing and growing areas for medical and recreational, the administrative offices, the conference rooms, what happens to the other companies, our residents that are there, how that affects parking and circulation, utilities, water, big question. Big question. We're going to address water, emissions, air. Peter, you're concerned about air. Waste material and how we deal with that, the energy requirements that we're going to either self-generate or go get on the outside. What's the building going to look like? Is it going to look like the same? Is it going to be enhanced or not? In fact, I have several ideas on that. Parking requirements, well, there's a lot of parking there. Traffic administration. Security, big question. How do we deal with that? Economic impact. We're going to give you an overview of our business plan. It speaks to what the R&D area is and what it's going to be composed of and the kind of companies that we think will invite. Some have already said they want to come. That's the area that I'm very excited about, frankly, from my background. The medical manufacturing, as well as the recreational growing or manufacturing, the lack of retail, important point, and then the tax benefits to North Andover. What's real, what's not? What is potential and what is, on the books? What kind of jobs are we going to create? What levels? Both within the factory and then potentially outside it. And then anything else you all can think of, because there will be other questions that will come up. But our whole hope is that what we can do over the next 4 to 6 meetings with you is basically go through the whole pre-site plan approval. Okay? Solicit your agreement or not, or additional data you want or not, pointing to the fact that you can support the town meeting in the fall. It's a yes, now I understand what they're going to do. We have the conditions to protect our town or enhance our town or whatever you would like. But that's what we're after. And then in parallel with that, we're going to hopefully set up to negotiate with the host community, status for that. Now, the thing that's important, and one of the things that I heard you brought up, John, is that the other thing that we're dealing with, beside the pre-site approval, we have all these new laws coming out of the state and how that affects the various towns. So I heard you mention this, and I think it's a good idea, that in parallel with going through the pre-site approval with the planning board, that we have another ad hoc group, either led or certainly led by the planning board, working with the town attorney and others that you feel are pertinent to really work on the bylaws itself, because they're a little fluid right now. So that's sort of in parallel to that, because one is going to affect the other, clearly.
Yeah.
But we can work on one, getting the water treatment straight and getting all the energy, and the sort of the external parts of it, as well as deal with the legal status. So Dr. Goldstein has asked me to help do that with you. He said, we're both crazy to be on a planning board for that long. I mean, I admit I am, maybe you do, but it's, I had to move out of Glastonbury because I just ran out of friends, and go to a different town. That's why I'm in North Andover, not Andover anymore either. I shouldn't point that out, should I? But anyway, don't point that out. So we want to work with you. I understood, you're not going to believe this, but after the town meeting, I sat down and wrote what I thought we should have done, and then I listened to your meeting. It was the same. essentially the same. Because how can you make a decision if you don't have the information or the data? And the other point I want to make is that this is going to be the whole thing. It's going to be a very comprehensive plan. We ask permission to give you the whole plan, not just give you this little piece and you ask about that, and this little piece and you ask about that, because you're asking about water. If we haven't got straight how much we're going to grow, that you're comfortable with that, we can't answer the other question, okay? If you want about tax benefits, I can't answer that until we know the whole layout of what's going to happen inside, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Does that make sense, John? Board?
I think, go ahead.
All right, I got one. So, I think that's a great start to the presentation. I have a lot of different thoughts, so I'll just kind of go through some of them. From your perspective, is there a reason, and this is a question that I'll want to at some point have our planner weigh in on. From a zoning perspective, given your background, is there a reason to treat medical and recreational differently?
In our plan, we will divide what we're going to grow in each area and why. Because there is, if you've read any of the material, and you probably have, about medical marijuana, it's the qualities of the plant are very important to its potential application. And it has to be monitored for certain qualities in it. So there is an additional need for that and growing for that. And the other thing is that there is a desire, if recreational marijuana is wholesaling, not retailing. You understand that?
Yes.
That's what we're proposing. Is that there is funding that could potentially support the medical device from the recreational.
So what is your thinking then that you would have separate facilities, not necessarily potentially in the same building?
I can't answer that because we've invited some gentlemen from Holland who now grow both.
They know a thing or two.
And they know, I can't say his name, it's about that long, but he's very, and that's what we want to present to you.
And okay, so I mean, and I think that
I understand, no, that's a good question.
that makes sense. I mean, as I recall from the town meeting, recreational really wasn't on the table, or now they're calling it at the State House over 21.
Yes.
So that has changed.
We have bought
And I
Emily.
don't have an opinion one way or the other on that yet.
I don't think
but
we know yet. I mean, right now, we're trying to understand the implication of the state law.
to be
We brought a young lady, Emily, here, if you want to pursue where the state laws are, to give a little update on that.
I think, I mean, I'm pretty fluent in that, but I think the board would certainly appreciate
Okay.
that.
Do you want, when we're through this, why don't we have Emily speak? Did you want to hear it
Yes.
tonight?
I think it would be good.
I think whatever information we
yeah.
can get before it gets too dark would be good.
Well, I'm not giving you a lot of information tonight. That's my goal, frankly.
You teeing up
My
the
goal is
process
talking about
tonight.
process.
Yeah.
You know, the things we're going to do to sort of put this on the table. If you ask me how much is going to be X, Y, or Z, I don't know. And frankly, I don't think we know yet either until we put the whole thing together. Because one of the problems we had before is that we hadn't done that. This is my opinion now. We hadn't done that, so we were answering individual questions. And you can't do that in a business environment. You've got to have a whole business plan that speaks to each piece of it you're trying to do and how you're handling the waste material or the air or the product or its use.
Do you have a plan to present any of this information to the town and to the public? Because it's one thing to convince the members here. Eventually, if you were able to do that, you'd have to then convince 66% of the town meeting.
I think common sense would say, once we convince you that this makes sense to put in front of the town, then we have an obligation to the town to inform them of the same thing we've told you. That's my opinion.
So you guys can do it however you want. I would say that we often hear from members of the town, and we'll hear from them throughout this. You may want to start that early.
Well, thank you, okay. Got it.
Not saying to do it before you have a plan, but.
We're trying to, kind of watch protocol too here, too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, Mr. Goldberg, that's important too, but we have to convince you. If we can't convince you, then, that was a problem the last time. because you said, we need more time, that's what I heard. We need more time to go through this thing, because this thing is an elephant. You know, we approved a mouse.
So let me
Not a
ask
good
you-
parallel, but with
Can I
that.
ask you a question about, is this, we're talking about process, and I hear you saying town meeting in the fall, and I'm looking at my calendar, and it is the end of July now, and you're talking, we don't have a fully baked business plan. What do you have in mind for this process and this timeline? What are you envisioning, and what do you think is realistic in terms of you coming to us with this fully baked business plan that we can really get our arms around, examine, ask questions, go look at the site, do all of those things? What is it that you, I mean, what's your, I guess, what's your ideal and what's your realistic, like?
Well, we've looked at what I actually gave you, I actually worked out a schedule, Jennifer.
Great.
Because I can't help myself, that's what I did, you know, for 35 years.
I'm a lawyer, I love schedules, so fill me in.
Actually, it was a PERT diagram is what it really was, but, and I had the critical path plotted through it, you know, and my friend said, well, wait a minute, Hooks, easy, because originally, we took each of the, how many things do I have here? I have 25 things we have to address to you. I broke them down every meeting that we had to present that. The thing that you don't know, which I can tell you, is that Dr. Goldstein has assembled a team that we will then give you the details of at your next meeting, of the gentlemen and ladies that are putting all this together. And the reason that my friend here is watching what I say is that he's responsible to generate all that information. Dan is now putting together the team that is going to talk about the layout. We now have all our water requirements straight, and we think where they're going to come from. Our air control, our agricultural guy has sort of laid out the area that we can grow and the lighting systems. You want to add to that?
I'll just say I'm Dan Leary. Thanks you again for having us back. Maybe if I could rephrase, you know, there's nothing half-baked about sort of the efforts that have been going on for the last few months, even since town meeting. It's more of, and maybe what we'll hear from Emily in a little bit, has to do with the shaping of new legislation and exactly where this business opportunity goes, and how it's going to work with the town and things like that. So there, you know, the pieces that sort of remain outstanding now are how this is going to interact with the town and licensing and then on to the permitting process. But, you know, this first step of zoning and, you know, having believers in the town that this is very real and it's going to be a great thing for the town is really the first step. So thank you.
Aaron, do you have any questions?
No questions, just more of a statement. I welcome this process and the fact that I welcome any lawful business people embarking on business ventures here in the town, and so I look forward to this process. And I guess my concerns were stated by Peter earlier before the town meeting in terms of understanding, I guess, inputs and outputs, understanding what your business venture is going to take from the community, what it's going to need, and then what it spits out at the end in terms of not only product, but you know, the air, the water, the general, you know, keeping to what this town is currently, what people expect of the town of North Andover, and not changing it drastically.
You know, Aaron, when we sat down with Dr. Goldstein, I said, at town meeting, they care about, when they're sitting in their seat, how does this affect me? How does this affect me? How does it affect, you know, the air I breathe, the road I drive on, you know, the lights that are blinding me from the parking lot, you know, to my taxes, just good or bad, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what your regulation speaks to. And if we just looked at that, hope you're not watching, Jeff, you know, we need to answer those questions. And what we heard from you was, rather than do it later, we want to do it now. And the thing, Jennifer, I would add to your comments is that Dan said is that this is an existing building with tremendous assets in terms of power, in terms of size, in terms of water resources, in terms of energy resources, in terms of parking, in terms of circulation, et cetera. So there isn't a lot we have to do, you know, in terms of construction. There's some, clearly, but in terms of starting from scratch, it's a dramatically different situation. And I heard one gentleman say the other day in a meeting, this building was built for this. Well, not exactly, but it certainly has a lot of the resources to do it.
First, I apologize for the squinting. I've got the setting sun this time of
I was
year.
hoping it wasn't what I was saying. or what
Lines
Dan
up
was saying.
directly with this seat, and
It looked like a black ring.
those shades are not doing it. So I'm getting a little nice suntan here. So I'm not squinting at you. I'm just trying to preserve my eyesight. So I'm very encouraged to hear how you have outlined the process you have in mind. And the specific examples that you listed that the process would include all, I thought was great to hear. It's not just the water, it's not just the power, it's not just the air and fumes, it's everything. And you went through an impressive list. So
Thank you.
I'm all ears, truly. And,
That's what Ross Perot said, so be careful.
well, yeah. But I am all ears to hear about those things. So the good news is that it was great to hear you outline the process. You know, the other news is I'm really
Show me.
looking forward to seeing that delivered.
Well, I have to admit, Peter, when I listened to your comments, and I turned to my friends who were listening, I said, he's telling what's happening in Colorado, and we haven't provided any information to discount that or discredit it or validate it. You know, and of course they're going to go to any place else they can find information to do that. So,
I'd rather hear it from you,
thank you. Well, him.
from the team.
Okay.
So I also have a little experience in running a research center.
We
Not-
actually, we looked your
Yeah.
bio up.
Not as much as you do,
I don't know about that.
but our research center includes a very exciting example of indoor agriculture, among many other areas of research. So it's all very exciting stuff, and you've set my expectations high.
Peter, one of the companies I'm on the board of is Water Analytics. It's a local company, and they're major, and they measure water quality, both whether it be in sanitation or in processing water, drinking water, et cetera. Their biggest opportunity is in agriculture. They're selling all kinds of product to Canada and the whole Niagara, peninsula, down there, and they're growing it, and they're sending it out west, California and places like that. It's a huge business, huge business. Anyway. Yep.
Thanks.
Chris?
I do have a question, and it's not so much about what you've presented here, which, by the way, is very exciting, as you say. I'm kind of curious what your plans are for public outreach.
I wish I knew at this point. I could very, very candidly say to you, when we went to the first town meeting, I was in Florida, I came back late, and I found out that we hadn't been out in the public. We hadn't been telling the public what our plans were. And I think in retrospect, it's because we hadn't figured them out ourselves.
Yeah.
I may get shot tomorrow for saying that, but that, we have a wonderful, I think, a wonderful story to tell. When I first got involved in this thing, I was skeptical. I won't tell you why, but I was skeptical. And as a gentleman came over, Saar was his name, a friend of Dr. Goldstein's, and we started talking about the companies that are researching the various applications of medical marijuana, and I was absolutely dumbfounded of the areas they were looking into. I mean, we know about pain management and nausea under radiation control. We know about epilepsy, reducing the number of seizures, even published in the journal for New England Journal of Medicine, last month. They're credible data now, how it reduces it. I did not know that they're looking into the whole field of autoimmune control. that there are various elements of this plan that can accelerate or decrease your autoimmune system. So lupus, you heard the lady speak at the town meeting, it was lupus, it's an autoimmune problem, that it reduces the effect of that momentarily. And they're doing more and more. I have to tell you, I have a son for 25 years who's had a severe autoimmune problem. He walks with a cane, his hands are gnarled, his shoulders don't work. His immune system is tough, and for 25 years, and they cannot do anything to help him. And when I read this, I said, my goodness, is this an opportunity to create the environment to understand something like that? You know, psoriasis. I didn't know psoriasis is an autoimmune disease. I didn't know that. There's now creams that are cannabis-based that control that. I didn't know that. Anyway, I don't mean to go on, sorry, but
Well, I do
there are
hope-
stories like that we have to tell, if I
Yes,
may.
and I do hope that you do figure out a way to do that, because I would assume that because the planning board is now your first stop, I mean, nothing happens unless, you tell your story here first. So we can assume that we will have people calling us or sending us emails and asking questions. And it would be, I think, helpful for everyone to be able to say, oh, did you know that in 2 weeks there will be, and this is an opportunity for you, and I'm sure the Board of Selectmen would appreciate the same ability to say, there is an informational session, and it's this date, it's at this time, this is where you can go.
We need to reach out to a lot of
And
organizations.
it doesn't have to be a lot of times, it could be twice, might be enough, but it might save these boards from having people sitting here asking questions that we can't answer unless you're here. It makes it difficult to have a dialogue between the public and you in a forum like this. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Chris, I know exactly what you mean. We used to say in Andover that if we, apart from the selectmen and the planning board and the finance board, if you haven't sold your idea before you get to the town meeting, it's dicey.
Yeah. And I think you have a lot of people who are excited and
we have
interested
a
about
wonderful
it.
story-
And there's a lot of people who are fearful, and
Yep.
so, because it's a lot of unknowns,
Yep.
so I'm certain that you can make that happen, so I.
Well, thank you, and thank you. We will.
You're very welcome.
Absolutely, we will. Hear that?
I'm not trying to get closer to you, I'm just trying to get out of.
If I hold this up, hey, how about if I hold this up, Peter? Is that better?
Let's put Peter there.
Hey, Peter, this works.
You're spot on.
See
The
that?
right avenue.
See that? These are my notes.
So-
That's my only problem now.
So, you commented on the medical aspects, and I find that to be most compelling.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people do. Why not? And I mean that. But I also want to encourage the team to, as compelling as that part of the story is, I also need to hear about the agricultural component. And I'll try to be candid that I was a little concerned that I heard a lot about this very compelling story that was compelling for me to hear. But I feel like we couldn't get information on sort of what seems like a huge part of this proposal, which is the cultivation of a plant with special characteristics. Someone at the town meeting said it's just like tomatoes. It's not like tomatoes.
That's true.
The amount of water, the care of cultivation, the amount of energy required in the form of light is dramatically different. And all of those things have significant consequences.
Yep.
So as compelling as the medical side is, I'm persuaded, I need to hear about the cultivation.
That came across very clearly. Not only you, several of you brought that up, and several of the townspeople brought that up as well. The gentleman that talked about, losing Lake Situate, which I live on. Anyway, we got it.
Rebecca, any comments or questions? Yeah, sure.
So just in terms of you, I think there's a broader discussion later on about the moratorium and the recreational and how these things all tie together. But I know you mentioned providing information at maybe the next meeting about who the team was and things like that.
Yep.
Anything you can provide in advance.
Oh, we will do that. I'm sorry, I should have said that.
Yeah.
One of the things in the planning board in Andover, we said, give us the darn thing before the bloody meeting.
Yes.
So we can read it and digest it. And Dan has pledged me, he promised earlier today to do that. We're gonna give you this information before the meeting so you can digest it, because it's gonna be substantial.
And remember,
Which
I
is
mean,
good
those
news,
things
I
become
think.
public records, as you
Yep.
know. So,
Yep.
obviously take your time and figure out what you want to give us,
Yep.
but
Yep. Yep.
as an attorney, and I want to see it ahead of time so we can actually have a meaningful discussion when we're actually sitting here.
Oh, your attorney, no, we're not giving it to attorneys. I'm sorry.
Not for this, sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay.
You'll have to borrow a copy of it. No, we will, yes, that's only fair.
Got any other initial comments from the board?
So two things, John, is that we want you to agree that it sounds like this process makes sense to you, that we're going to start working it out, and we'll talk about the schedule, Jennifer, when we get the material that we need to do that. We encourage you to pursue this idea of a parallel effort, with the town attorney and the others, John, that you talked about earlier, to sort of go after the legal part, because you got the site and its effect here, and then you got the overarching laws, which are, I'm not sure what they are, but, so those are the two things. Would you like Emily to give you an update on?
I think that would be great.
Okay.
Maybe if I could introduce Emily Katonic from ADS Ventures.
You come up here, Emily.
Emily's been working with our team for the last 3 or 4 months as we've been watching the legislation play out very carefully. The big difference between where we were and where we are now is in shaping what we're doing really has come down to the new House bill that could go into effect here very soon. So Emily's played a really key role in that understanding, and we really thought it'd be helpful for her to join us tonight and try to help dissect what this means from a municipality standpoint. And always would welcome, if you have any direct questions, to contact her about those.
Yeah. So we actually prepared a little bit of a breakdown for you, just breaking out a high-level overview of what the new law is and specifically what the impact will be on municipalities. So as you guys have likely seen in the news, there's been significant back and forth and a number of different versions of a rewrite to both the adult
Could you give
use
town council one, too, please?
and the medical use marijuana laws. There's been a lot of back and forth and a lot of different versions that have been spun around. I do think that this is one time where the legislative process has really worked out to come out with the best possible compromise. We heard a lot throughout the process from the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, just to make sure that the interests of towns are adequately protected in this new legislation. So a very, very high level overview. As I mentioned, it's a pretty significant rewrite to the existing medical and adult use marijuana laws that were both passed by way of ballot initiative. So this measure actually makes some sort of changes around the periphery of the adult use medical marijuana law, but it actually repeals wholesale the medical use marijuana law. And so it takes jurisdiction of the medical use marijuana law out of sort of DPH and streamlines the entire process under a Cannabis Control Commission, which will be set up this fall. Their work will be informed by a very robust, it's a 25-member cannabis advisory board that will be actually divided into subcommittees as well, which will look into specific topics, including public safety, impact on communities, participation of small business, etc. So it's going to be a very robust regulatory process. Under the new regulatory scheme, the medical marijuana law regulations will continue in effect until sort of there is this new comprehensive regulatory scheme that's set up next spring, beginning in April. And the bill is currently before the governor. It's awaiting his signature at the moment. We anticipate that he'll sign it tomorrow. We don't anticipate that the governor will return this bill with any amendments or propose any changes to the law. We've heard, from sources both inside the building and out that he approves the language as it's currently drafted. So like I said, the Mass Municipal Association was heavily involved in the process of drafting this compromise. They really wanted to ensure local control of zoning decisions. There is a bifurcated process in the current language whereby municipalities who had approved the adult use marijuana law would have to pursue a referendum process with a very specific ballot question that would need to be placed on a special ballot to impose any reasonable restrictions on the siting of adult or medical marijuana use establishments within their municipality. So communities like North Andover, who had rejected the ballot initiative, however, would be able to impose reasonable restrictions on marijuana establishments through the typical sort of ordinance and bylaw process. It's worth noting that this system is sort of already coming under potential legal attack. So there are some questions as to the equal applicability of the law throughout the state. And this is something that we could see challenged once the new system is up and running, and we could see a reversion from this bifurcated process back to the process that was specified by the ballot initiative, which was a referendum process in every community to impose restrictions, which, as you guys know, is more burdensome on municipalities in terms of having to call a special election and get council to approve the ballot question. So moving down to the next section, of course the state wanted to make sure, learning lessons from other states who have enacted adult use marijuana laws, that the tax revenue that was generated by this new industry would fully support the administration and oversight of the industry. This was a very big concern of the Mass Municipal Association because they wanted to make sure that administration and oversight of the industry wouldn't siphon money away from the state's support of our communities, which is obviously very important. So in reviewing the ballot initiative, the committee that worked on this compromise actually increased the excise tax rate that was imposed on the retail sales of adult use marijuana from 3.75% up to 10.75%. So the total tax rate for Massachusetts is actually somewhere in the middle of the road in terms of states who have approved similar initiatives. It's at 20%. Host community agreements are also a potential source of revenue for host communities. This was, of course, a big component of the MMA's advocacy up on Beacon Hill is preserving the ability of municipalities to negotiate with establishments who wanted to come and open up shop in their communities. So the new marijuana law actually requires both medical and adult use marijuana establishments to enter into host community agreements with host communities with a clear nexus to the costs that will be imposed upon the community. So that's kind of a high-level overview. Happy to answer any pointed questions that you guys have.
So the new host community language, if the governor signs off on what's been proposed, limits it to 3% of sales and a maximum of 5 years, correct?
Correct.
So it's pretty significantly different than the host community agreement that was kind of discussed at town meeting. Those numbers will have to be analyzed later on, but it's a significant change, I think.
Right.
It's an open question for me if you're doing medical and recreational, if you would then have two host community agreements or one. That would be a question. The local control issue, that's going to be sorted out. Personally, I have no idea how that's constitutional. North Andover didn't vote for, and at some point I think I'll get to my point. We didn't vote for whether we approve it for North Andover. We voted for whether or not it was going to be a state law. And now to take that vote and then change it to mean something else,
Right.
I have trouble with. I think that anything you kind of, if you're going to presenting legal stuff, I think you should definitely work with our town council and talk with her. Because I think that's who you guys sound great, but you certainly have, you're advocating for your client. We're going to rely on our town council
Yeah.
for our legal advice. So I think it's important that these questions are raised in advance and discussed. And I think, definitely getting this material, things like, again, to us early so we can go over that with her would be very helpful. So, thank you.
I got a quick question for you here. The local option on retail sales up to 3%, which Mr. Goldberg was just referring to, would that function like our local meals tax, like that? That we'd have to have that passed?
So those are actually two separate things. So one is the host community agreement, which
Okay.
gives you just a 3% of whatever sales, except for sales that are going to like a retail establishment, to another medical. So if you're doing a cultivation and you have X amount of sales, we can have an agreement for up to 5 years. We get 3% of that.
Gotcha.
The separate tax is like your local.
Like the meals tax, so it would go before a town meeting and you would up or down on that portion of it. Local option on retail sales up to 3%.
Right.
So we would have to vote that in separate and distinctly. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. I'm not sure. any
No,
town's
if you
not
wanted
going
it,
to.
I don't think it'd be crazy not to.
Yeah.
Sorry, it would be. Okay.
Any other comments from the board on this? If I could maybe ask town council if, and I don't know if you had, wanted to make any comments or you had any questions at this point?
No, I don't have any questions or comments at this time. My only thought is that I'm happy to work with the planning board and to be involved in this process and to really give this a thorough vetting and also ensure that we have enough time at this point to review the proposed bylaw. But other than that, I think that this is a great start, and anybody who has any questions for me at any time on the board, please feel free to give me a call at any time.
Can I ask how, if we're looking for your opinion, I know unofficially we can come and get your opinion, but if we want something more official that we can share with the town, I think issues are going to come up about, what happened when something was rejected at town meeting and now it's back, and you've given us some guidance on that, which was great. And I think town folk will probably people will want to know, what if we don't do anything? What if we just don't zone marijuana at all? The board can't come up with anything. Well, what happens then? Is it nothing can come in? Is it everything that can come in? My perspective would be we talk about it here, vote on it, some questions, and present them to you if that's kind of how you would prefer to get them. I think that makes it so everyone knows what we're talking about, knows what the questions are, and makes it so that we can share an answer and say this is what the answer is to a particular question. So I didn't know if you.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
If you want a formal legal opinion on an issue, then absolutely.
I think there are going to be plenty of places for
Yes.
informal. I think there are going to be
Yes.
lots of places for that. I think that's 95% of what we do is just going to be coming and
Right.
questions and stuff like that. But I think there are going to be some core issues that not only we, but the town are going to want to know answers to in advance and be able to, to have
Absolutely.
answers to.
Absolutely. Feel free. And I am willing to participate in any working group and come to the planning board meetings and be available for any questions in that forum also.
Suzanne, are you in a position tonight to give us your sense of the current state of play of mass law and how it may relate to specific situation in North Andover? I don't want to put you at a disadvantage. Applicants' counsel has had some time to put this together. I don't know if you're in a position to give us your sense right now.
So I can give you a sense. I think that the applicant's counsel has given a good notion of the changes to the law. I think that one of the things that may be a little bit different is their position is that there's reasonable regulations through local option, in the way that I would read the law and the Mass Municipal Association is reading the law, is that the town or there's a local option to ban various aspects of marijuana, recreational marijuana. And I think another change, sort of a major change that we had discussed at the last process, was that the medical marijuana could convert to recreational, sort of that automatic conversion. And what the law has done, or the law that's before the governor, says that a town cannot pass a bylaw that operates to prohibit a medical marijuana establishment that was licensed in July 1st of 2017 from converting. So it's got to be licensed and operating before it can convert to a recreational. Before, remember, I don't know if you all recall, there was a sort of a pass that medical marijuana establishments got with regard to recreational. So they could just convert, and they were given a leg up. And now that's changed a bit. So I think that's an important thing to consider in our review of recreational versus medical marijuana. And other than that, I think that the Applicants Council hit all the major points on that issue.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good, thank you, appreciate it. So I think the focus tonight was right on process, because it's the initial discussion. Any concluding remarks? I mean, I think we have to spend some time talking among ourselves about how we want the process to go. But I'd like your last thoughts about sort of how we move forward at this point, and we start the process.
Well, I think we kind of summarized it before, and I think we got agreement on it, is that we're going to be back here in your meeting in August. And we're going to have probably, of these conditions, I would guess close to half of them we will have information on. I'm speaking a little bit for you, Dan. Is that fair?
Oh, certainly.
And then if more, we'll see.
Okay.
The other thing we want you to do is, we want you to come to the site next week.
We definitely want to come to the site.
Because we want to hold
obviously have to-
Jennifer's schedule. See, that's the important thing.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have to post that and.
Well, whatever it is, we want you to come as soon as you can.
Yeah,
Give us a little time to work out some of our layout questions, so when you come, we can be more definitive about how the building's going to be organized. Because rather than just walk around, right now, it's like a big hole. At least in the back it is. The front's quite busy, but the back is
when would
essentially
you
empty.
recommend, like, time of day of week? I mean, give us some idea of what your preference would be.
You name it, we'll be there.
Yeah.
That's your convenience, because some of you work, some of you are only here at night. I'm up early in the morning. If you want to come at 5, I'll be there. Chris isn't coming at 5, I sense. But anyway, no, you talk to yourself about when you think you can come. We honestly would like to show you around, because it's quite a place. And I think, and I know, Jennifer, I'm kidding about your schedule question, but when you see what's there, I spent more time looking, as an operations guy, I spent more time looking at the ceiling of the power drops, okay? The amount of power they have in the ceiling, the air control systems that they have, I mean, holy mackerel. The cistern tanks that hold all the water from the roof, there's thousands of gallons in that thing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You begin to realize that they have a step up on things that would take months and years to potentially do. They have to be modified and they have to be okay, but talk about parking. I mean, I remember my days in the planning board. We spent half our time at the damn parking lot. You have enough parking spaces for this or that, et cetera. We got how many acres of parking?
Yeah. I agree, that's not one of our big issues.
I know.
Go ahead.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But, yes, sir.
So on the question of process, it's great to hear that by the August meeting, you're thinking maybe half of those items you might be prepared. That's the kind of information I think we're all excited to have. But I'd like to ask you about process. We already talked, and I think we agreed, that you were going to help make this information available to us in advance of the meeting.
Yes.
So if the next
Yes.
meeting is August 15th, and you're going to come with maybe half of those items, that's a lot.
Yes.
What would you expect, how much time are you going to give us to look through the material? If the
about-
meeting's on August 15th, when can we expect this volume of material so we can sort through it? And
about-
I'm not pinning you down to a day. I'm asking you to give us a sense. Are we going to see it the day before or the week before?
That's not fair. How about a week? Because the reason, Peter, that I can be a little aggressive is that we already have a lot of this. Because we came out of that town meeting knowing, that we had not done an adequate job and we had to get going. And Dr. Goldstein, to his credit, started flying people over here from Holland and from other places and from other parts of the United States to start putting together this information. I mean, he spent all day, the Dutch group was here for 3 days this week. And I've got him, I want to show you this. Here's a note he sent me. Here are 22 items he's resolved. All the way from the condensers, the overhead electrical grids, the HVA system, the penthouses, the cold air feed supply, the reheat coils in the penthouse, the grow blocks, blum, 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 blum. Now, are we all done? No. But we're working on it, Peter.
So can the process support getting this ahead of time, Rebecca or Suzanne?
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped up here because I was just concerned about the...
I'm eager to hear. Set us straight.
Yeah, it absolutely can support having things submitted beforehand, and I just wanted to make sure that there was an ample enough time for the planning board to be able to consider things beforehand. So I was asking when there is a deadline that things have to be submitted by in order to be contained in your packet, and I just wanted to make sure that that was sort of held to, because I think it helps the process
What is the
along.
deadline? What is the
Well,
deadline?
Typically, if the discussion item, we typically just ask that when we post the agenda, usually the Thursday prior to the meeting, that we have that information so that we can include it in the packet when we send it out and post the agenda. However, when it's an application, we typically ask for an application and the materials of that application to be submitted at least 2 weeks in advance so that we can have enough time to filter that through departments, department review, whether it be fire, police, DPW, and things of that nature. So this is a little bit,
Well, so where we're this early in the process, it's less important because if we don't have the information on something, we can talk about it at the next meeting where we're just talking about things. We can talk about something in August and say, we'd like, building and planning to have time to look at this. That's fine. As we get further along towards any actual applications or bylaw review, that's when it
Yeah, I
gets
think
more
that would
critical.
occur after the town meeting and when we do a formal application, because we had all the same reviews that we dragged everybody into as well, right? The town engineer had to go through all of it in great detail.
so this is all under the site plan review and not anything under the RMD.
I don't think so. Do you think so?
I've been calling this sort of the pre-site plan review group of meetings and discussion, because it's not a special permit application, it's not a full site plan review, it's not going to be that comprehensively put together. There's a list of 30 or 35 items that we think are going to want to be addressed in a discussion, and we're going to go very deep into it, but we're going to come in first with the big rocks, the big questions that we've heard 15 times.
Yeah, I think you have a pretty good
Yeah.
idea. I kind of view this as a great example of sort of like the Goldilocks balance, not too much, not too little, just right. Given what we're doing, we realize it's not site plan review, and we don't expect to have the same level of rigor, but at the same time, I think, and Peter has articulated it well, that there are certain expectations that I think we can reasonably have about what you're going to bring in advance.
Because we also realize that if the town meeting goes forward, that we have to come back with very detailed plans, much more detailed plans.
So the applicant doesn't intend on applying with the state for their license, an RMD license?
That process is already underway, so this is not intended to be a milestone in that process right now. I don't believe that's all already underway, and things are moving along. We do have deadlines we have to meet, which is our sort of sense of urgency with moving this through this fall.
I
But
just think it's important for the board to know that you're going through that process as well as the site plan,
thanks for mentioning.
initial site plan
Yeah.
review process.
Yeah.
And is part of that process approval from the local,
If they were to go for their
Absolutely.
RMD, under
Absolutely.
that, they would need to have that, yes.
So I see this process really as just you presenting your vision to the planning board with the idea of informing how the zoning bylaw changes, that article will be crafted for the eventual special town meeting. That's fair to say?
Well, and as well as you being comfortable that what we're presenting is something you can live with, because that's what we heard you say.
That's
We
ultimately
weren't
the goal,
uncomfortable.
is that the special town meeting, it's all about approving that zoning bylaw
Yes.
change. It's
Yes, it's not, oh, I see. I'm
projects.
sorry, Aaron, yes. Yes.
I'm not sure what committee get to a special town meeting, but I agree with you said to
That's
that.
their goal,
Maybe, I
to
mean-
move towards that.
Right, so from my perspective, and this is kind of beyond, I don't see how we talk about the medical without talking about the, what they call it, recreational or over 21. To me, they're intertwined, and I think we need to discuss whether they should be one, I mean, the state law is now talking about everything together. I don't know if our bylaw should be everything together, or if it should be separate. I think that's an important discussion to have, because it very well may be that 2/3 of the people won't support something with recreational no matter what, given, the vote. And if we wanted to do something with medical, are we shooting that down by combining it with recreational? At the same time, I have strong feelings that if you're cultivating, you're cultivating. This is what I want to hear about recreational versus medical. Is
Yeah.
it different processes? Is it the same?
I mean-
Or is it the same water? Is it different
I
lighting?
thought it was a fungible
Right,
thing.
what,
but, yeah.
is there a difference? Are we talking about different, levels of THC and stuff like that? That means we should zone it differently. I mean, these are big questions that I have, not for tonight. But, how are we zoning for retail, whether it's medical dispensary, which you say you're not doing, but someone else might want to, knowing that there's this giant grow factory next door, I might as well be here. Are we gonna have retail establishments wanting to come in town so that there's a quick, pipeline to that? I don't know these questions and whether these things should be intertwined, but I think we at least need to have a broad overall discussion about them and decide that. Should they be intertwined? Should they be separated? And it's, at this point, I think to me, the discussion we're having now, kind of to your point, Aaron, is not limited just to, are we gonna have a bylaw at 1600 odds, but it's, what is the vision of zoning? And just really zoning in terms of marijuana in North Andover. And then this is a big part of it, a very big part of it, but the recreational is another part of it, and the changes in the law, if this law goes into effect as it is it constitutional with all its parts? What are the Board of Selectmen going to do? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts that we have to wade through.
If we get to the point where there is an article that is a special town meeting with an article put forth, who is going to draft that zoning bylaw change? The previous instance, it was the applicant, and it seemed to be, with the meetings that at least were held here, it seemed to be pretty big mess. We went back and forth
Yeah,
on the terminology. so-
Speaking personally, I would prefer that the town draft the article and support the article as opposed to it being a private citizens petition. I think it has broader consensus. It'll include the things we want. I don't know if we'll reach that point, but that would be my strong preference personally. And it's what's worked better in the past when we've done that and we've actually sponsored it. Also, when you do that, it has a better chance of passing too. I mean, typically there's always a certain suspicion on a citizen petition, whether it's for the benefit of the town or the benefit of the applicant, and that's, like it or not, that's part of what's there, so.
So Suzanne would be taking the lead on that effort?
Well, it would be really
Well, in conjunction.
Rebecca, Jean, Suzanne. I mean, that's part of what we have to talk about, the process, I think, of how we form a group to actually put that together. And, to some degree, Mr. Johnson's right. What we learned from the process there will infuse the bylaw and back and forth, so they're they're overlapping to some degree, but they are distinct, as Etienne said, so, yeah. Okay, good.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We appreciate you coming in, and we're looking forward to working with you. Let us talk among ourselves about when, if we want to follow up on that, is, Dan, are you the one who's going to be the day-to-day contact?
I'll be the tour guide.
Okay, yeah,
Please.
so, okay.
It's sort of like old times being here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. So, maybe a little bit just in terms of process, because there are, you know, two parallel processes going on here. How, more so with the zoning piece of it, where we're going to take the lead, how do you think we should collaborate? Who do you think should participate? You know, how would you like to do it?
I mean, I like the idea of a working group. I mean, I don't know that we necessarily have the authority to create it, but I think being part of it and appointing, I mean, to me, the people that is the planning department, I think to some extent, maybe engineering, just with some of the real aspects of it, but the, you know, town manager, town council, and potentially someone from our board and someone from the Board of Selectmen. And those are the major, at least to start, and then calling people in as questions arise. You know, as questions arise, the applicants of the previous, you know, petition would certainly be someone to be involved a lot. But I think there would be other people to call in. But I think that's kind of the genesis of it. And I think that could deal with my issue of dealing with both recreational and medicinal, because I think both need to be dealt with.
Yeah, and I still think even with a committee, this board will have to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because ultimately we're the ones who own it. So, you know, we may have a working session where we all participate. So Dan, what do you think? I mean, how do you think we should do it?
In terms of, are we still talking about just the?
To draft the bylaw, you know, who, you know, how should we put a working group together? Who do you think should be all the players, that sort of thing?
Well, I think it is important for members of the planning board to be in it. I think that I should be on it to assist with that, and planning, somebody probably from the planning department, maybe both of Rebecca and Jean. And also, I would think that it may be good to involve the applicant also, the property owner, to get that input on the sort of ground floor. That I've seen that work, and I think that you've had that process here in North Andover before, where you're working with the property owner who desires to have the zoning amendment passed, to be involved initially, so that you're not working sort of in isolation and then bringing it out and then it doesn't work, and you have to, you know, sort of incorporate those comments at a later stage as opposed to on the ground.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. That's just in my own experience of what I've seen.
Okay. Pete, you're going to say something? No.
The health department too, I think, at some
Yeah.
point is an important piece.
Feels to me if we're going to do this, we're going to have to get going pretty quickly, because there's a lot. And I think in the end, it's really going to be the core of the work is going to be done by the planning department and yourself, really. I mean, that's where most of it's going to come from. I'm wondering if, Rebecca, maybe you and Jean and Suzanne could spend a little bit of time together sort of sketching out something, you know, for it, just in terms of, you know, how you think the process should work, how frequently, you know, who would you like to have participate? What do you know already in terms of research and stuff? Because I know you've already done some work on this. And then just get back to us fairly quickly, because I'd like to keep the momentum up and maybe form this before we have another meeting of this board, because it's, let's say, it's going to be 3 weeks from now, and we ought to kick this committee off prior to that, just because I don't think there's a lot of time, and we ought to get going pretty quickly. So.
Jean comes back on Monday, so Jean, I and Suzanne will sit down and we'll get to work and we'll get you something. But do it,
Yeah.
get started.
Okay, good. Everybody okay with that?
That sounds great.
And the other thing is, when would you like to go visit? You guys said anytime, really?
Well,
I mean,
but I heard two things, John. Anytime, but also a concern about giving enough time so that we're not just looking at an open space, but we're looking at a space with some idea of what would go where, not a final plan. And so I'd really like to know what, it's the last week of July. What week of August would you be ready to show us with a sense of not a final plan, but an idea of what's going where? What's-
Personally, I think I'd like to hear more information before I go. I mean, there are pros and cons. One, you go there with an open mind and stuff like that, but if they're coming to us in 3 weeks with information potentially about, and I'm just picking things, water and lights and stuff like that, it'd be nice to hear some of that, internalize it, and then go there and say, okay, so this is what we were talking about when we talked about water. This is, at least have a little bit more
I'm
of a
good with
sense.
that.
I mean, it seems to me
Yeah.
that sometime end of August, early September would be
Okay,
a good time.
why don't we do that? Would you come in the next time, that night, we'll pick a date?
That actually makes sense,
Yeah.
because we could actually point to and show you some examples that we've
Good.
Right.
presented.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Good. Great, okay. Thank you. All right. We're on to great adventures there. So moving right along, the other item we have tonight is the 61A right of, well, it's actually notice of intent to sell. It's not at the point of right of first refusal. I have a little bit of information on this, but I don't know if Rebecca or Suzanne, you do first to maybe lay out some of the facts, and then we can talk about the specifics here.
There was not much to lay out. We received the letter, and
Can you
I
put the
can
locus
jump
up?
in. So we did.
Can you put the locus up?
So I spoke with the seller's attorney, Attorney Shaheen, and so the letter that the planning board received, I think only had one signature. I got the second page with the second signature. He did say that what is sort of represented in the letter, that the buyers are intending to use it for agricultural purposes for their horses, is as far as they know, but they have that's all they know is that what they've been told. There's no guarantees. It's obviously the buyers who will make that determination as to how the property will be used. And the other issue I discussed with them was whether or not, just in terms of providing the town with the notice of intent to sell, whether they considered that the town's right of first refusal was then coming up, is arising, and he said yes, so that's what they did consider.
Okay.
So the town has 120 days.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so just sort of before we step into it, I don't know if any people have any questions about the
There's
specific.
two parcels. This is the one parcel, and this one that's not highlighted is the second parcel.
Okay. Just from a general perspective, this is actually a parcel, and you're probably all familiar with it, that actually I think has significant conservation interest. This was always a parcel that we've had a lot of interest in terms of preserving and protecting, both for watershed protection and open space protection, and the fact that it's close to the old center. So there is a real interest in preserving this property. What the town has done on a number of occasions over the last few years is when there's a situation like this, we've actually brought in a third party. Originally, we used the Trust for Public Land as our partner with this, and so if you're familiar with the properties on Half Mile Hill, that's how we use the Trust for Public Land to come in. More recently, we've been working with the Essex County Greenbelt as a partner in the project we did out on the end of Edgedale Street a couple of years ago was an example of that. I've already talked to the Essex County Greenbelt about this, and they're beginning to take a look at it. What somewhat complicates the situation on this property is that the party that's going to buy it may not develop it. In fact, that's, you know, it may in fact continue under 61A. I would think if they're going to use it for horses, they probably are going to do that. So it's slightly more complicated, and I think we do have to sort this out. And again, I think, you know, I'm overstepping my legal knowledge on this, but if indeed this becomes the only right of first refusal opportunity we have, and we may never get it again, that may cause us to take a different path than if they're going to keep it under 61A and we keep it like that. Because if it's going to be like this for, they're talking another 15 years, we probably don't need to do anything. But if in fact they are going to develop it, that would be, you know, potentially a decision that we would have to make. One of the advantages of what Essex County Greenbelt would do is we could assign the right of first refusal to them, and they could exercise it, and then that way we don't have to call a special town meeting. We can wait till next year's town meeting, and this would be the kind of project that would be done probably with community preservation money. So, you know,
So my question is, how would it actually work? Who makes the decision as to exercise the right of, we want to buy this property? And
well, it would end up, you need to get consensus with the Board of Selectmen on this, because ultimately they have, you know, what you would be asking them to do would be to assign the right of first refusal to a third party. They could do that, or they could just say, we're not going to exercise it, period. Just, you know, if they wanted to, they could do that. But they, you know, they could extend that right of first refusal to the option to the third party. And what would end up happening is Essex County Greenbelt would have to make a decision about whether they wanted to do it or not. I think they would, because they know us and they have a good track record with us. But, you know, they obviously would take a certain risk, because if they exercise the option and the town decided not to do it in the end, they would be left holding the bag, you know, and there's a substantial amount of risk there. So,
do you know if the CPC has enough money to?
There's plenty of money
to do that, and so they could theoretically take an application out of turn to, you know, out of cycle. And
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we actually had one of the projects that we actually did, we had a similar situation. I don't know if you're familiar with the property up at the top of Half Mile Hill called Sunny Ridge.
No.
But that actually came to us as a 61A, and we actually had to call a special town meeting to allocate the money at that time just for the option. And then we voted on it the next spring at the regular town meeting. Fortunately, the laws changed to provide more flexibility because you can assign the option now. But that time we actually did that. So I think there's, you know, this one is, it's complicated like any land deals. You know, when you've done those things, you know they end up being complicated. But this one, I think, has a good chance of working out. It just has a lot of further steps to go.
So what is the planning board's duty here? Is simply to make a recommendation to the selectmen
Ultimately to the
regarding
Board of Selectmen, yeah.
This hasn't been before the board of selectmen yet.
No, it hasn't been. No, it hasn't been. So I think right now everybody's just, you know, reacting to this, understanding what all the facts are, and you know, I've just seen some of the material in the last week, so I'm not super familiar with it. And Suzanne, I think you're probably as far along as anybody, really. So we don't have to do anything tonight, but I just wanted to put it on the, yeah.
Does it make any sense to talk briefly about the sensitivity of?
Go ahead, yeah.
So, I think everyone's familiar with the location, but there is something about this that I thought I might point out in case you're not familiar with it. If you look on that locus where the words Dale Street are, right after the last letter T in the word street, you see a dark line moving up and to the left. That's a stream. Now that stream actually, and it flows downhill towards the lake, moving up in the photo. If you go backwards, down, that stream actually bisects Ridgewood Cemetery and then continues above Ridgewood up across Johnson Street and by Sutton Hill Road. So that's the reason that if you look at a map of the watershed, there's a big bulge in the watershed going way the heck up to Johnson and Sutton Hill Road. It's because of that stream. Well, it's because of the slope of the land, but that stream drains that area. Now, this piece of land is, so the lake, can you scroll down a little bit, Rebecca, to see the top of the photo? I'm sorry, other way. So if you look at the top, move your cursor to the right a little bit, right there. No, back, okay. And so just below, right there. The stream goes through that property and then into that little pond where the cursor is. And then about 200 feet from that, it crosses under Great Pond Road, and then another 50 feet crosses under Pleasant Street through a culvert into the lake. So the property itself is 0.4 miles from the lake shore, so it's outside the zones. But the fact that there's a stream running through there means that, you know, that stream is running most of the year. So it's 20, 30 minutes for anything that drains in that stream to get into the lake. And if you look around the lake, there's something on the order of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 significant tributaries. This is one of the 6, where it drains a substantial amount of water from a large area of the watershed into the lake. So the impact of what happens on that property is more than the proximity of 0.4 miles, because whatever happens goes into the stream and it's 20 or 30 minutes into the drinking water supply.
Okay, well, thank you all for listening on this one. Let's schedule this again next time. Oh, another thing for next time, let's, in fact, maybe if you got 30 seconds, Rebecca, on the master plan committee, just, you know, we ought to schedule a short discussion master plan every meeting, but just, you know, I don't know if anything's happened since.
Nothing's happened since. There is a meeting scheduled that you are all invited to for this Thursday. But that has been the latest update as of right now, so if you're interested in more information, then it would be to attend that meeting on Thursday at 7 o'clock here at Town Hall and the second
This
floor
is
conference.
with the committee, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. And is it on the 31st, what's or the August 1st, that they're interviewing people about open space or, no, about zoning? Isn't there, I thought the consultant's interviewing somebody.
31st, it's master plan at the library on natural resources.
Okay.
So there's individual working groups that they're gonna
Okay.
be having at different dates and different locations, and that was the email that Jean had sent out in regards to those specific ones. The core assessment meetings, they're called. So I believe, August 2nd is housing, July 31st is national resources and open space and recreation, July 31st is also historic and cultural resources, and July 31st is also transportation and circulation. So they're all at slightly different times, slightly different locations, and those are the dates, and those will be those core assessment meeting groups
Okay.
where those issues will be focused on. But the one that's coming up this Thursday is more of the kind of meeting of the group and the selection
Okay.
after they've just been kind of formed, after
Yeah.
we voted on it at the last meeting. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like a kickoff, so to speak.
Okay, great.
But I'll put that on the agenda for a reoccurring item.
Okay, yeah, just a short discussion, I think. it's a good
Definitely,
idea.
and I will add this other issue onto the agenda for the next one as well, the 0 Salem Street. And then we will get you some information concerning the medical marijuana, recreational marijuana
and to see what Suzanne, Jean, and I put together in terms of research and moving forward with the bylaw. So hopefully we'll have that for you prior to the end of next week.
Okay, great. Good. Anything else? Pete? Yeah, yes.
So we've discussed before the board previously, and I just thought I'd maybe repeat something we've discussed before.
Yes.
And John, correct me where I'm off track. John will. So part of the role of this board is watershed management through the bylaws with the different zones. And that really came about in the bylaws as a result of the Giardia event in North Andover in the mid-'80s. Giardia is a parasite that got into the lake, resulted in a boil water order, and that's what led to the construction of the water treatment plant, a $20 million investment, which addressed the situation. North Andover Water has won awards for being great water. So at that time, there was a report, 1987, on the watershed. And the report looks at where is the watershed, how does it affect the drinking water supply. And since then, the town, the water treatment plant, has taken measurements in the lake and in the tributaries on key measures like phosphorus, nitrogen, dissolved oxygen. And that informs how well is the lake doing as the source of drinking water supply. So one of the things that we raised earlier was, as this board manages the zoning for the watershed, one of the questions I had is, how are we doing? How's it going? It's been 30 years. Are the zoning rules effective? Is the quality of the drinking water supply stabilized? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? How are we doing? And one way to assess that is with the data. So the testing that's already being done by the water treatment plant, we had discussed, could come before this board, maybe once a year, maybe once every 6 months. Not sort of heavy, what the heck does this mean, but just basic measures. So a basic measure, for example, is how much phosphorus is going into the lake, because that can lead to algae, which is not good. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to very briefly talk about this, and as a member of the board, I would be very interested in having the Department of Public Works present to the board every 6 months or every year a trend that might show the last 5 years, maybe the last 10 years, which way are the lines going, so that we have, as a board, have a measure for how effective are these zoning rules in protecting the drinking water supply. The data's there, and I just wanted to throw this out to the board. I think it would be a useful data-based measure of effectiveness of part of what we do as a board.
And as part of the master plan, I know that the zoning, rewriting some of the zoning is a key component of the master plan process, and I believe there are some administrative issues that are associated with the watershed bylaw and things of that nature, so I believe that that will come about in a major way. So maybe it's become something that we do once we have some of those changes in order as well, and maybe there's some additional input that we could put in or do in terms of that. So I don't know if that's something we want to talk about with the master plan committee or to do separately, or...
I think it's absolutely related, but I also think regardless of the outcome of that, the town owns data that would be of use to this board as a measure.
Okay.
And from my perspective, since the data exists, we ought to ask to see it. We don't need to see it every month, and we don't need to see 30 years worth, but we ought to see 5 or 10 years of 2 or 3 key measures. And the water department does post water tests on the websites, but those are tests of treated water, which of course always meet or exceed EPA standards because they do a great job. These would be measures of the raw lake water, which is the source of the drinking water.
Yeah.
So I don't quite know how we act on that, Mr. Chairman. And
Rebecca,
maybe
why
we
don't
just think about it, I don't know.
No, I think we should do it. I think we should do it. Why don't you reach out to the new head of DPW and invite him in, tell him we've already asked him questions that he doesn't know the answer to. And, yeah, it'd be a great, I think, way to, kind of have a good rapport with them and see, maybe sometime in the fall, if they'd like to come in.
Yeah, definitely. And the working group is still in order?
Yes.
Okay. And has he participated in the working group at all, or
And what?
has he
Oh, yeah,
participated
yeah,
in?
yeah.
So, okay, so he's fully aware of?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. I will make sure to invite him to our fall meeting.
All right, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our July 11, 2017 meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any other business? If none, would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.